Hello, Greg Herbert again. The nation of Japan over the years has brought us some great and inventive things of the modern type, such as automobiles, electronics, some brilliant inventions, and yes, the splendor that is anime and manga. However, there are many weird things about the land of the rising sun that disturb me to no end. First of all, the use of the talent and intellectual ability to make inventions that only gratify the entertainment of the human condition and not better the human condition. Whereas American and most Western robotics are about building things and creating things to help business run smoother and more efficiently. Japanese-created robotics are nothing more than pleasure toys to entertain. Dumo arigato, Mr. Roboto, asimasu. The robotics coming out of Japan are more or less pleasure toys to astound, but not doing anything meaningful to Japanese humanity. Whatever ideas the Japanese have in the robotics field, they had it imported from the West, mainly the US. Despite their technological prowess of the past 60 to 70 years, they are, contrary to popular belief, behind the times in terms of actual robotics. Those giant robots are nothing more than play toys and model kits. Sadly, despite the romanticization of Japan and robotic technology, Gundams are not real. The best thing they could come up with are Osamos and sex toys, and that brings me to number 2. The fact that there is an overemphasis on over-the-top sexuality beyond basic heterosexual male-female relationships, perverse sexuality, celebrating a culture centered around loose sexual intercourse, whether it is of the heterosexual nature or homosexual nature. Now in the West it is rightfully marginalized into being a teeny-tiny creep space, to be righteously labeled as the sick shit that only social rejects and criminal perverted creeps with no life bask inches, not suitable for anyone with a life. That's why anime here in the West is never too advanced to anything more than a teeny-tiny speck in the big global media universe. Speaking globally, and what is there will be associated closely with sexual perversion, namely the hentai-ization of anime and manga and the over-sexualization of mainstream models and actors, often blurring lines to wet swat and woes who. This can make the majority of Japanese popular culture be dismissed as nothing more than fat fodder to both non-discerning Japanese and global audiences. In Japan it is through subtle and sometimes direct associations with mainstream products such as the large, often vocal, and rabid fan communities of related media. A lot of the sick stuff often rises to the mainstream, often being seen side by side, even though those that are in the mainstream Japanese pop culture media world rather have nothing to do with their more perverted counterparts, like it or not. The sick fetishes ranging from gratuitous panty shots and breast exaggerations on children's cartoons to the rape, incest, bestiality, explicit bodily functions, and even guru in both animated and live-action realms of Japanese pornography have been standouts of criticism amongst both Western and other Asian observers. Seriously, every single facet of this so-called subculture should be rightfully questioned. The ascent of anime fandom in the West and around the world has made this culture outside of the main popular culture this bastion of disturbing weirdness in the bigger picture of a pop culture, and in some cases the mainstream culture that's beyond odd. Yes, what the fuck is this shit is a question that us as both anime fans, manga fans, Japan culture observers, and other that observe the bigger international culture picture should be asking the Japanese people. Really? What the fuck is this shit? Do the majority of you in Japan really have any dignity anymore? Do you really like people asking, what is wrong with your popular culture? This is why Tokyo Mayor Shintaro Ishihara has been so livid in his rantings about morality in both Tokyo and throughout Japan. Japan, once home to noble samurai warriors, Eastern chivalry, respect and hospitality, has now become a hotbed of perversion, homosexuality, gender swaps, misrepresentation of women and children, exploiting them as sex objects to cater to the minority otaku fandom. The slow mainstreaming of this and related cultures is the face of Japan, even when the reality dictates otherwise. The marketing of sexualizing young women and now even older women. This has to make the average Japanese mad about how their culture in toto is seen as by the rest of the world. The Japanese have been silent while the filth culture of sexual promiscuity and other perverted and inappropriate fetishes have overtaken the original natural beauty of the real authentic Japan as the international symbol of the land of the rising sun. Coupled with Japan's saddeningly declining economy and the recent moves by President Abe to re-energize its armed forces after a long dormancy, probably in preparation to do military actions against countries like China, This bodes uncertain for the future of Japan, especially after the nuclear issues of recent years not being resolved, and the nation still vulnerable to nuclear problems. Japan has now more so than any other developed nation has become just like the otaku minority culture the nation has become famous for, and the majority of average Japanese are like ostriches ignoring the cultural takeover of the land by the otaku minority, the sexual fetishists, the perverts that tend to proudly represent the culture of Japan today, make that culture of all Japan today, even though the reality is that they don't represent the whole of Japan's pop culture. Also, the perverts of the West and the humongous link that is the internet has made a superculture of ad hoc perversions that encompasses the perversion of Japan and magnifies it to worldwide exposure. The hentai culture, largely quietly and rightfully relegated to otaku pockets, has now, thanks to the deceptive media of both Japan and the weeaboos of the West that have gravitated happily to the Japanophilic perversion, have become the spokes culture of the nation. The people of Japan of normal mindset need to take their culture back, and that includes their popular culture. We in the West know the difference between what is acceptable and what is perversion, and we accurately brand it as such. TV shows that show skin and four-letter words are put in appropriate places. The majority of TV cartoons do not overemphasize sexuality of characters. Lines are not blurred as much as in Japan. The conscious Japanese need to bring this to the attention to the purveyors of line-blurring media, peppering over-the-top perversion of many kinds to the masses, many of whom would agree with me that it could do without. To the conscious Japanese out there, it's time to stand up, speak up, and take your culture back from the perverts. The time has come to do away with the sex sells on everything motive. It's time for the conscious men and women to take the world's view on Japan back from the perverts, sexual deviants, and the rest of the minority that have spent years of their pathetic lives to make their picture of Japan, that exaggerated nation of blurred lines, bigger than the real authentic Japan. Japan, you the conscious need to awake out of your sleep and take your country back right away.